Just plug it in so we can start. This isn't a major event. And Hare Krishna. Well, I wasn't expecting attendance from all these august Vaishnavas. I did invite Yadubar Prabhu to speak about Srila Prabhupada, which he kindly declined. But he's going to do a talk. Then you have to bring one for everybody. He's going to do a talk with a PowerPoint presentation. You need to bring one for everybody. And on another day. So just hang on for that. And do we pass the book around, or you just want me to read?
We crashed the party to hear you.
We have it's usually quite a short half-hour reading, and I think we've got more space out here. And you can hear back there, Shambhi Hari?
Yes.
Okay. Whose sound system is this, by the way? Thanks to Niranjan Maharaj, because our sound system melted down, unfortunately. Okay, so we have His Holiness Niranjan Swami, Devamrita Swami, Yadubar Prabhu, and all the august Vaishnavas. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvadi Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Pasacha Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We're continuing on in this book, Swamiji's Transcendental, Swamiji, and Can you turn on the other light as well? Somebody turn on. There's another light over here. Just, yeah, that's it. Right. Okay, and this portion, we just finished reading about how the Bhagavad Gita, first Bhagavad Gita printing, and the arrangement that was made, and who's that? Who's that?
No idea.
Oh, I thought it was someone you knew. So we're reading about this one heading is the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. We're in chapter 4, I believe, and we just finished hearing about how the Bhagavad Gita was printed. If the Bhagavad Gita was the perfect book to convey Vedic knowledge in general, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, TLC, was perfect for conveying the specific tradition with which Swamiji was aligned. This latter book is a summary study of the historic 17th century Chaitanya Charitamrita, which Swamiji would translate in its entirety at a later date. For now, he would present contents in an abbreviated version, briefly recounting Lord Chaitanya's teachings to 5 prominent followers: Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Prakashananda Saraswati, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Ramananda Roy. Here the reader will find not only detailed information about the non-sectarian and deeply spiritual philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, culminating in esoteric truths of love of God, but also why opposing philosophies such as that of monism or impersonalism are considered lacking. That's a kind way of putting it. Are considered lacking. In South India, where both Ramanuj and Madhvacharya teachings are very prominent, there are actually still Gurukulas, and specifically even Sanskrit Gurukula, children who just learn everything in Sanskrit and sort of trained to become real brahmanas, pandits. And I heard from a reliable source that there was one such school where the children are taught that when they go to pass stool, that they recite a mantra that says, I'm passing stool on Shankaracharya's face. Hare Krishna. Of course, Vaishnavas have although the philosophy, they're very antagonistic too, but they recognize Shankaracharya as actually being the incarnation, some form of incarnation of Lord Shiva, so they offer him respect. These are the new ones, Tirtharaj, the painted electrical. Here, the lights, the little lights.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Okay, so yes, more than lacking. The Swami wanted his young followers to know Lord Chaitanya and the special nature of his teachings. To this end, he worked on this summary of Lord Chaitanya's life and precepts concurrently with his Bhagavad Gita translation. That being said, the books took a long time to arrive, with the Gita joining Swamiji's movement in late 1968 and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya a few months later in 1969. In the interim, much had happened. The movement's success exceeded all expectations, with the Beatles helping to popularize Hare Krishna in the Western world. More like George Harrison, but anyway. The TLC was important for Swamiji, and Brahmananda played a critical role in its production. In fact, Swamiji gave him specifications for the book, knowing that his enthusiastic disciple would carry it through to completion. The first printing would be 5,000 copies, 6.5 by 9.5 in size, roughly 400 pages, 10 to 12 point font, heavy board, strong end papers, blue gold stamped cloth. Blue gold stamped cloth? Swamiji knew exactly what he wanted. Brahmananda remembers the book's genesis. Hey, be quiet! Quote, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya was done entirely on Swamiji's dictaphone, with the tapes transcribed and edited by Satsvarup. Stanley Moskowitz, initiated as Satyabrata approached Swamiji and begged to be given the responsibility to publish it. He worked in the printing trade and had no other service. Swamiji agreed because there was no other prospect for publishing at the time. It turned out that Satyavrata's plan was that he would save each week a portion of his wages from his low-paying entry-level job as an apprentice until he had enough to pay for the printing. This would essentially mean that, had the plan been put into effect, it would have taken years to publish the book. But he didn't tell that to Swamiji, who wanted the book printed as quickly as possible. In 1967, this is continuing still, the quote, I received a large insurance award from an accident I had in high school in 1960. The amount was $5,000, which was a lot in those days, because a new car cost $2,500. A year before I joined, I brought a brand new Volkswagen Bug. Beetle. And it had everything. It was beautiful. It was green. I brought it to the temple, and what I'd done is I gave whatever Lakshmi we had to my wife, and I brought the car to the temple. Because when I brought it to the temple president, Udamashloka Prabhu, said, "Where's the money?" I said, "I gave it to your wife." He was a very mellow person, but he said, "Why? Why do you do that?" He said, "Well, Prabhupada says 50%. So 50% to family members and 50% I brought here, and it's in the form of the car, brand new car." Of course, a Beetle was a bit of a small car for devotees, so we sold it after a while. But bottom line is, that was also $2,500. I don't know how much it is now, but probably a fortune. Swamiji was in India, and I wrote offering the amount to him. He replied that I should immediately publish TLC with the money. So I retrieved the manuscript from Satyavrata, showing him Swamiji's letter. I remember that he was really disappointed. But the larger issue, he agreed, was getting the book printed. The interesting thing here is that opposed to our Bhagavad Gita adventure, this book would be entirely self-published, which in some ways Swamiji preferred. Sample copies arrived even before the Gita, but the bulk of the TLC shipment came by sea from Japan, showing up in maybe March of 1969. I rented a U-Haul truck and went down to the docks to pick them up. Where's that? Is that on the other side of the river?
Yeah, it's on the other side.
End quote. The details of how the book came to be printed in Japan are noteworthy. Before Brahmananda could solicit any printers in New York, a devotee named Dwarkadish Das, Donald Doherty, who had worked as a junior advertising executive for Pepsi-Cola, mentioned that his company did all their advertising, printing of posters, handouts, brochures in Japan because it was inexpensive and high quality. In addition, shipping costs were low at that time. It was through Dwarkadish then that Brahmananda first became aware of Dai Nippon, a major printing concern that had been in business since 1876. They came up with an estimate of $5,400 for the book, says Brahmananda, which was perfect in terms of the money I had at the time. After getting the manuscript ready for publication, he continues, I had to select the style and size of the font, proofread the galleys several times, get the artwork and photos, have Swamiji write the photo captions, and the frontispiece material, write copy for the flaps and rear cover, and even design the front cover. In the end, Swamiji preferred our approach to TLC over the Macmillan Exchange. He saw the importance of both content control and creative control. But it was yellow, it wasn't blue, right?
Right, it was yellow.
Actually, at first, Swamiji was considering farming out his forthcoming books, such as Srimad Bhagavatam, to prestigious publishers, as he had done with the Bhagavad Gita. But this was prior to seeing the printed version of TLC. Once he saw that the devotees could independently produce high-quality books, he decided that the best course of action would be to start a publishing company of his own. Swamiji wrote a letter to Brahmananda soon after receiving TLC from Japan. Quote, regarding the Macmillan Company's printing Srimad Bhagavatam, we may note herewith that the Macmillan's publication of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and our publication of teachings of Lord Chaitanya, is the difference between heaven and hell. If Macmillan Company can invest their good money for publishing our Bhagavatam, they must take the standard as we have presented. The first canto cannot be reduced to less than 200 pages. Bah. In the Bhagavad Gita as it is, we have cut short the pages under the instructions of the Macmillan Company without explaining many important verses. We are presenting a new philosophy to the world against all foolish impersonalists, atheists, agnostics, and all other imperfect philosophies. Therefore, we have sufficient chance for explaining the purports of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So if Macmillan agrees to these conditions, then we can entrust the publication of the Bhagavatam in their hands. Such a big company would world-famous publishers, and we are giving them the topmost transcendental knowledge in the world. Why they should become miserly in the setup and quality of the book. Is this disturbing you, that other noise? No. That you want to change to go inside?
I can hear very nicely.
Okay. You're okay? Well, we could go inside.
Well, I don't want to be the cause, just because I'm having a difficult time.
Well,
Okay, I can hear.
it's certainly nicer when it's like this. With the end quote. With the implications of this letter resounding throughout his movement, Swamiji began planting the seeds of his own publishing concern. Of course, the devotees had already purchased the press back in October of 1966, and they had used it to print their early issues of Back to Godhead and various little booklets and handouts, as mentioned in Chapter 3. Swamiji had been recording his lectures and having them transcribed from the very beginning. It was for this reason that Gargamuni had gotten him a dictaphone. The story behind his disciples' purchase of this device should be known. Soon after joining the movement, Gargamuni came across a dictation machine in a store window and thought it might help Swamiji with his work of translation. So he bought it. When he presented it to Swamiji, he thought he might have to read the directions to help Swamiji learn how to use it. But the Swami, as usual, was unpredictable. No, it is not necessary to show me. I already know. And he just started using it, producing tape after tape. In fact, he was diligent in recording his lectures and otherwise reading directly into his dictaphones, original Sanskrit texts, and his immediate translation. But then the devotees had to transcribe the tapes, which presented a problem. As Brahmananda recalls, quote, how will the devotees transcribe all these tapes, all this precious knowledge coming from Swamiji's lips? So we would all take turns. You had to use a foot pedal with it, and it took some adjusting too. You have to be sitting at a desk in order to use the foot pedal, but we didn't have a desk. We didn't have any table. We didn't have a chair. We all just sat on the floor. So you would put the typewriter on a milk crate and you'd sit on the floor, cross your legs, and with your foot, you'd have to somehow use the foot pedal. With crossed legs, it was very uncomfortable, very awkward. You can imagine. But that's how we used to do it. Hayagriva did it for a while, but he couldn't do it. I did it for a while, Satsvarup did it. Anyway, we weren't so successful in doing it, but somehow we were getting along, little by little. After some time of struggling with a dictaphone and transcribing the tapes, one day in walks this boy. His name was Neil. And he was from Antioch, the school where you have to do real-life service in the world to get class credits. So he enters the storefront and says, I want to do service. I want to work for you. And by Krishna's arrangement, it turned out that he was a very good typist. And he also knew how to use a dictaphone and how to transcribe too. So we set up a little table in the temple, in the storefront, like a piece of wood on some crates. It was amazing. He was clearly sent by Krishna to assist Swamiji. He went to work and was just knocking off those tapes like anything. It was amazing. Swamiji was very encouraged and raced through Nectar of Devotion, though it took some time before it was finally published. Neil helped Swamiji finish it, and then he said, okay, now I have to go back to school. For Neil, it was a brief interlude as part of his school project. He left, and we never saw him again. But his service was appreciated and valued by Swamiji. Usually, people don't make such a big thing out of getting a dictaphone. But everything that related to Srila Prabhupada for his followers was spiritual, divine. And in it, devotees were able to see Krishna's arrangement to facilitate Srila Prabhupada in his mission. That was end quote. Things were different now. ISKCON Press would be a more substantial endeavor, meant to facilitate Swamiji's desire to produce full-length books. And so in 1969, the press was born and would gradually evolve into the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, BBT, the world's leading publisher of books on Vaishnava spirituality. In time, Swamiji would use the BBT to publish his multi-volume translation of Srimad Bhagavatam, complete with original commentary. Each book in the Bhagavatam series is roughly 400 pages or more. He did the same with Chaitanya Charitamrita and various other books as well. His oeuvre is staggering and a major contribution to the world of religious literature. Oeuvre means his production or his...
I don't have my glasses on, so I can't.
It's a word I've never seen.
French.
Yeah, what's it mean?
Like the work, the piece of work.
All of his verse.
ISKCON Press, subheading. There were initial thoughts that the press might begin at the new ISKCON Center in Montreal, since this was where Swamiji's books started to really manifest as a tangible reality. Sometime in 1968, Brahmananda had gone up to Canada to bring him the galleys for his Bhagavad Gita and TLC before they were printed. But the actual press began in Boston. Brahmananda remembers the early days. I didn't know. I came up to Montreal to show Swamiji the galley proofs for both teachings of Lord Chaitanya and Bhagavad Gita as it is. I just happened to have both galley proofs that had recently arrived. So it was a wonderful thing to bring these galley proofs to Swamiji for checking. I was there only for a few days, maybe a weekend or so. Swamiji personally read through the entire galleys and made notations in his own hand. He did the proofreading of the galleys. Everything was done by Swamiji. It was a very personal kind of thing. Of course, that gave him great pleasure because he wanted his books published, and we had started to do it. So he took great pleasure in proofreading those galleys, and he handed them to me, and it was very wonderful. We discussed starting a press then and there, but eventually we set it up in Boston." End quote. In 1969, the fledgling ISKCON Press was finally established, comprising and printing Swamiji's translations and commentary of the important Vedic work Sri Ishopanishad. The book was subtitled "The Knowledge That Brings One Nearer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna." It's not subtitled that now, is it? In many ways, this was an introductory book, but it's crafted in the same style as Swamiji's Bhagavad Gita, with transliteration, word for word, and commentary. The text serves as a bridge between the impersonal tendency of the Upanishads and the distinct personalism of the Bhagavad Gita. Swamiji thought it wise to use a lecture he had given in Conway Hall in London entitled "Teaching of the Vedas" as the book's introduction. In this lecture, he explains how one should approach the Vedic literature, a meaningful essay not only for his disciples but for anyone who seeks to genuinely understand Vedic wisdom. With Sri Ishopanishad as a starting point, Swamiji's own publishing company would bring to the world numerous works of transcendental knowledge. For Brahmananda's part, he would commute between 61 2nd Avenue in New York, where he was temple president, and ISKCON Press in Boston, where he served as press manager. An early member of the press, Stephen Hebel Swarup Das, relates his memories of the early days. You know him? Swarup Das? Is he still devotee?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Where?
Quote, "Since the very next day after I joined the temple in the summer of '69, I had been serving as Brahmananda's secretary, working at the quote-unquote office, which was a rented basement apartment on East 10th Street. I was also handling whatever BTG subscriptions were coming in, as well as orders for the few books we had back then. We had the abridged Gita, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and the 3 volumes of first canto Srimad Bhagavatam that Prabhupada had brought from India. About a week after New Year's Day, a brahmachari named Karunamoya drove the dark blue ISKCON Press van, Chevy 108 model, to New York to pick up Ramananda and me and take us to our new home at ISKCON Boston, 38 North Beacon Street. As soon as we arrived, Brahmananda set up his office in the front room. We brought our desks from East 10th Street with us in the van. The Big B, as many of us affectionately called Brahmananda at the time, that's what we call him, or just B, put his big desk by the bay window looking out onto the yard and street, and I had my smaller desk by the door that Brahmananda insisted be kept locked most of the time. The Big B rarely left that office. He'd even wait until the last minute to go to the bathroom, at which time he'd walk quickly through the hall with his blue janitor pants and large set of keys dangling and jangling, while every devotee he passed would bow down offering obeisances, making him very uncomfortable since he couldn't stop to return the gesture. We did that, offering obeisances to each other. That was just standard practice when we woke in the morning, devotees came into the temple room before Mangalartik when we were chanting our japa, or after Mangalartik when we were chanting our japa. And when devotees met, then they greeted each other, bowing down, saying Vanchakalpa Tarubhyasya and so on, and then embrace each other. Not that, they come and they say, Vanchas Prabhu. Very... What?
Or this.
Yeah. Vaishnava etiquette, which is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said the ornament of Vaishnavas. I believe the first printing done by our own Chief 29 offset printing press was of pamphlets called Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure, and 2 essays, The Peace Formula and Who's Crazy. As Brahmananda's secretary, I would mostly type all his correspondence, which was more often than not to and from Srila Prabhupada. In those days, the topic in those correspondences mostly centered around the ongoing establishment of ISKCON Press up in Boston. Emulating Prabhupada, Brahmananda used the dictaphone and gave me the tape when he was done, which I transcribed using a machine with a foot pedal and earphones. Whenever he or any other devotee in the temple would receive a letter, aerogram from Prabhupada, we would all gather around the recipient as he read it aloud. By the time I got to Boston in early January of 1970, ISKCON Press was geared up and ready to print and publish, with the departments and manpower in place to perform every function and task. That included transcribing, editing, typesetting, proofreading, layout, plate burning, plate opaquing, offset printing, cutting, signature folding, stapling, binding, and many other things that we don't do anymore with the help of computers. And when it was decided that our Chief 29 wasn't up to the job, camera-ready copy was sent off to Dai Nippon in Japan. With Prabhupada's approval and encouragement, Advaita, who had some little printing experience before joining the movement, had taken some additional vocational training at the New York School of Printing on West 49th Street, Hell's Kitchen. Is that what West 49th Street was called?
That neighborhood was back then.
That neighborhood was called the Hell's Kitchen. And so, why kitchen?
Hot and...
Were the restaurants there?
No, just... It was a bad area back then. Now it's...
Isn't that what all the restaurant supply houses were?
It would cook you.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Are you sure? That's Canal Street.
That's Canal Street?
Yeah. It was a rough neighborhood back then. Now it's, property values to the sky.
And so when time came, he was as skilled and energetic as any printer press operator could be. The editing and proofreading, English and Sanskrit, was handled by Satsvarup, Jayadvaita, and Pradyumna. Uddhava and Madhusudan handled the camera work. Chandan and Aravinda were up in layout. Jadharani, Parikshit, Murlidhar, and even Devahuti were the artists. Others who had worked on binding, folding, typesetting, etc. were Vaikuntanath and Sharadiya, Sachisuta, Patita Udaran, Palika, Arundhati, Peter, Kushakrata, and myself, Brahmananda. Brahmananda was the on-site manager. A call went out to all ISKCON temples everywhere for anyone and everyone who had any experience with any aspect of printing or painting. Kula Shekhar was sent from London, and over the course of time, while in Boston and later in Brooklyn, others came as well. And so it went, until ISKCON Press was finally settled in. After Krishna Book was published, we began concentrating heavily on Nectar of Devotion, the unabridged Bhagavad Gita as it is, and Srimad Bhagavatam. It was decided that each of the 10 chapters of the second canto would be separately printed in paperback, and so we produced 10 books with the titles: The First Step in God Realization, The Lord in the Heart, Pure Devotional Service, The Change of Heart, The Process of Creation, The Cause of All Causes, Purusha Sukta Confirmed, Schedule Incarnations with Specific Functions, Questions by King Parikshit, Answers by Citing the Lord Version. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. We were printing other paperbacks as well, such as The Perfection of Yoga, and of course, our monthly Back to Godhead magazine required continuous effort to make sure every 30 days a new issue was ready to go to press. You can see how much emphasis Srila Prabhupada gave to printing. You could really say that it was his primary focus, in which he really trained, engaged his disciples to turn out his books. And that should not be underestimated in terms of the importance that book distribution had in Srila Prabhupada's mind and heart, because he received that instruction from his spiritual master. If you ever get any money, just print books. And that's what Srila Prabhupada did. He just, he printed books, and as you can see later on, here we're printing books, but the sales of books is not exactly matching the printing. Well, that will happen later on. And that book distribution is more important than ever. Whether it's done through audiobooks or like this, hard edition, or it may be just on Kindle or in that type of format book. Nonetheless, transcendental knowledge should be made available to people. They are more educated than ever before. There was a time when a great majority of the world was illiterate. There are certain parts of the world that are still illiterate, but there was a time when the world was illiterate, and only a very few in India, Brahmins and so on, and maybe some Kshatriyas, and in other parts of the world, aristocracy, they knew how to read, and the rest of the world, they heard what was written in dramatic performances. That was what replaced television, internet, etc., is that you had drama troupes who would travel from place to place, or even immediate areas, locales. Then people would perform Ramayana, Mahabharata, different very important Vedic literatures, with emphasis on what people could understand. Even to the day of Narottam Das Thakur, Srila Prabhupada points out that he wrote his songs in a very simple Bengali style in order to be sung. And that was the other alternative, is that that's what songs were also all about, is that they would sing and people would join in and perform, and they would sing like one bhajan, what we sing a bhajan, and they would sing a bhajan for hours, repeating it in certain parts. And in this way, people learned certain important things, and they heard, very often they heard from realized souls. And of course then there were in the holy places where people would go, as Prabhupada says, there were always great souls. Tirtha kurvanta tirtani swanta stena gadavrita. So the importance of holy places was to hear from Vaishnavas. It was not so much about bathing and maybe a little more so about visiting the different places of pastimes, but the most important thing was to hear. Now that I mentioned that, tomorrow begins a 3-day festival for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's 150th anniversary. So tomorrow's the actual day, birth anniversary. So everybody should go to the morning program. We'll be going as well. And Shambhi Hari is arranging transport. Yes, we had these little books. They were coming out. They were wonderful. Unfortunately, they weren't all available where I was in Montreal. Says Jayadvaita Swami, one of the early devotees at ISKCON Press, who went on to serve as senior editor of the BBT. Quote, ISKCON Press was the forerunner of the BBT, which Srila Prabhupada created on May 29, 1972. By that time, ISKCON Press had moved from Boston to Tiffany Place in Brooklyn. But the BBT was a two-headed operation, with pre-press and some printing of small books done in Brooklyn, and sales, finance, international printing, and more handling from Los Angeles. The two trustees, aside from Srila Prabhupada, were Bali Mahajan in Brooklyn and Kurandar in LA. In-house, the Brooklyn unit was still called The Press. Later, The Press moved to LA in 1975. 1973, I went to New York and to pick up Krishna books, little paperback Krishna books. Were they printed at that press, or were they printed in Japan?
I'm almost sure they were printed in Japan.
The
trilogy, the famous trilogy.
Yeah, the famous trilogy. Beautiful little softbound books, fantastic for book distribution. And we brought them to Montreal, and I lived in the part of the Brahmachari ashram that was the book warehouse, and I built a little house out of the boxes, and I slept inside the house under Krishna books, surrounded by Krishna books. I was really upset when they ran out. Brahmananda adds his memories, quote, I left ISKCON Press Boston in 1970 after taking sannyas, so I don't have first-hand info of what happened after that. The press moved from Boston to New York, Tiffany Place, under Bali Mardan, to be near the new Brooklyn Henry Street Temple in 1970. There exists a letter dated July 29, 1970, in which the BBT is created with trustees Rupanuga, Kurandar, and Bhagawan. This was the same time that the GBC was created in the direction of management, dated the day before, on July 28th. But I don't think much action was taken at this time to make the BBT a reality. Then there is the formal creation of the BBT in the founding document of May 29, 1972, appointing Bali Mahardan and Kurandar as trustees. That marks the actual beginning of the BBT. By this time, the book publication activities must have moved from New York to Los Angeles. BTG offices stayed in New York and didn't move to LA until a year or so afterwards. End quote. The BBT was inevitable. Swamiji's books were crucial in disseminating Krishna consciousness worldwide. In fact, when Swamiji visited ISKCON Press in Boston in early 1970, he was given a tour of the devotees' humble facilities. Yes, I was saying that everyone reads nowadays. Everyone reads nowadays. Everyone is educated, and therefore they're inquisitive and they understand things, and especially religion or transcendental thought that is systematic, logical, comprehensive, and answers all the questions. When he saw the large offset printing press there, he told them how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his spiritual master, had referred to the press as the big mridanga. A mridanga is the two-sided drum used in kirtan, which assists in broadcasting the Lord's holy name to all within earshot. But the press, with its printing of books, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur reasoned, could produce something with greater range. It could be heard around the world. Swamiji then said that the printing press was the actual heart of his beloved ISKCON. Clearly, book publication meant a great deal to him. And that's it. Concluding there, chapter 6, Swamiji becomes Prabhupada. Interestingly, Srila Prabhupada then separates his book printing from ISKCON. And one of Srila Prabhupada's reasons was that if anything ever happened to ISKCON, if it deviated or if it imploded, then still his books would be published and book distribution would continue on. We will no doubt come to book distribution in a later chapter. Well, not really. It will probably be mentioned, but it's not titled as such. However, devotees should be aware that it is everybody's responsibility to participate to some degree in selling Srila Prabhupada's books. In 1973-74, I remember receiving a letter in which Srila Prabhupada says, I want that all of my followers go out at least once a week to distribute my books. So you can take it as you want. Is that an important instruction? Does it refer to you? Prabhupada didn't say my disciples, he said my followers. So it's very important that everyone consider, in my own way, how am I contributing to the book distribution movement of Srila Prabhupada? There may be a few great devotees who are distributing books for their whole lives, some more devotees who are distributing books full-time, but the number of devotees who are full-time book distributors is infinitesimal by compared to the number of devotees who actually identify with ISKCON. I say identify with ISKCON. So, well, what does it mean to identify with ISKCON? Then if those many even distribute a little, it's one thing for a few to distribute many books, but the other is that many people distribute even individually a few books. That adds up to a lot. But bottom line is that if one is actually a follower of Srila Prabhupada, then it's not the issue of how to just promote Srila Prabhupada with larger and larger, I don't know, festivities or activities of recognition, or possibly what is easier to do, and that is demoting everybody else to a bhakta level in the society, with the idea of creating a big gap between Srila Prabhupada and others. But it's to do what Prabhupada wants. And this was the first thing. If you do this, then, and if that's all that you do for Srila Prabhupada, then you're guaranteed a very wonderful perfection. So everyone's got time. Whether it's, 1 or 2 hours a week that I go out, or even when I go shopping, when I go out somewhere, that I always have books, because we're meeting people. That's one thing we do all the time. We meet people. So when we meet people, that we give them the opportunity to distribute, we give them the opportunity to get books. And especially the important thing is that wherever you go, dress as a devotee. Don't dress otherwise. You dress as a devotee, you have tilak on, because immediately people will ask you about who you are and what you're doing. And at the conclusion of your talk, the best thing is to do is to leave them with a BTG, a small book, a big book, ask for a donation, and then that discussion was successful. Otherwise, in Prabhupada's view, he says even you give some lecture, but if at the end of that lecture you haven't succeeded in selling books, it'll just go in one ear and come out the other, especially in the world that we live in today, where people are constantly bombarded with so much information. Give them something that they take away and put on their bookshelf, and then let the books do the rest. You don't have to worry about what happens after that. It'll happen in time. Thank you all very much. Thank you to the Vaishnavas for further honoring our reading, and Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution ki Jai. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Hare Krishna.